and Lobby Corps is hosting this workshop. We have MD coming over to help us with the process, with the portion of the workshop here today.
I'm Mihila.
Do you want to tell us about your major, class standing,
I'm a freshman, and I'm a political science and international relations major.
Nice.
I'm Jessica. I'm also a freshman. I'm a political science major, and I heard about this group and was served through there, so I'm just interested in lobbying, so that's all.
Great, thank you.
I'm here, former ASUCD senator, third year political science major, including lobby courses, my first year.
Half of the I'm a fourth year civil engineering major, and I heard about it from Karen.
I'm Lance. I'm a legislative aide. I'm a fourth year poli-sci as well, international relations. Glad you showed up.
Hi, I'm Godraj here, and I am an NPV major, but I really like sports.
I'm Matthew.
Matthew. Can you explain about the Lobby Corps here?
What?
What are you doing in Lobby Corps, Matthew?
I'm volunteer. Go out and lobby and stuff.
You did promote you to intern.
Oh, okay, I'm an intern. Forgot about that.
Woo, promotion!
So, well, I'm David. I'm an external intern on the second year. I'm a managerial economics and poli-sci major.
I'm Natasha. I'm a second year poli-sci and stats major, and I'm intern to director.
I'm Sunita. I'm a second year IR and econ major, and I'm the assistant external director.
My name is Ben. I am a community regional development major and intern, second year intern under field director.
I'm Joshua. I'm a third year. I'm political science and history double major, and I am the external director of Lobby Corps.
Well, overall, Lobby Corps is, let's get started with what is Lobby Corps, you know, and this is a big name, big thing. Well, it's kind of part of the student government here. Our job, our responsibility as a unit is to be out of the Capitol and represent East Bay students. And politics and representation matters a lot, so you have to be there to voice your opinion. If you don't voice your opinion, no one gets heard, and that's how you fall through the cracks. Our job is to make sure we end up representing East Bay students at the Capitol, and we need all the support we can for students, because, you know, when you have just one person saying, well, I believe this is how students think, versus just having a lot of students signing petition letters and backing this up, that makes a huge impact on the legislature, on the office we are visiting. So that's why it's important for us to connect with the students. And the purpose of today's workshop is to kind of bring awareness about the bill package we're working on this year. And before we get started, there's something, this is a long process. We get started in fall quarter, a lot of things happen, and now it's just spring, it's almost middle of spring. And you know, sometimes you just need the motivation to keep going, why we're doing this kind of stuff. So I kind of found this cool video, which I think summarizes a lot of concerns that we work on throughout the year, and I think it would be a good starter for us to take a look at. And the students in this video aren't from the UC Davis, but I think they do reflect, we can find a lot of Aggies which share the same concerns. So with that, I'm going to just play roughly 15 minutes of this video to get us started, and then we can talk from there. Let's see if we can.
I wanted to get my master's degree. The rest of my life is dramatically altered. Can I get married? You know, can real questions. Can I honestly have children because of the loan? And, you know, I don't feel like I can do that.
I think it's easier for financial aid officers to say, well, it's not our responsibility. We're giving you all the information, so, you know, you have to figure it out. But what does an 18-year-old know about private loans and direct loans? When I was signing those promissory notes, I mean, I didn't really look at the interest rate. I didn't really care. I just wanted to get the money so they wouldn't kick me out of school.
There's absolutely a student loan. And if it hasn't already popped, it's about to.
Which we understand you owe. This is a debt collector.
There's no signature in the office voluntarily.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is fruition of my college years, writing an envelope, business and salary, corporation life.
Collecting federal debt. We understand you owe.
This is to inform you that you haven't made a payment on your loan since the return.
In my family, my mom didn't have the opportunity to go to college, and so for her it was really important that my sister and I received an education. She sent us to private schools. When I went to public school, I went to one of the best public schools in Atlanta, and so the University of Pittsburgh offered me a great amount of money, and so I decided I'm gonna go. I've got financial aid, I've got a grant from the university. It's not gonna be that expensive.
I had wanted to go to that film school forever. I was just so excited about it for years. I mean, it was my kind of my biggest dream. It was like somebody gearing up to try to get into Harvard Law, and I got my acceptance letter, and I couldn't believe it. I was really on cloud nine, and no matter how much, at least at the time, that it cost, I was just like, I'm just gonna find a way.
All I know is that I wanted to go to school, so I had student loans available to me, and I took them out.
The birth of student loans actually happened by accident. In 1968, Reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act, there was a proposal to put in a tax credit for middle-class families that had 2 or more kids in college. And at the last minute, they came up with this counter-proposal to do a guaranteed federal student loan instead of a tax credit. You know, they never would have thought that it would have grown to be the largest single source of money for tuition than it is now.
Student debt has become a much bigger issue over the last 15 to 20 years. It used to be that you could go to a state college, work truly part-time at minimum wage while you were in school, or full-time in the summer, and if you came from a low-income family, you'd graduate without debt. Right now, that same student would have to borrow to get through school.
Public institutions, state schools, tuition has risen really quickly, especially in the last 10, 15 years. And it used to be that grants that you don't have to pay back were available to cover 75% or more of the cost of an average 4-year institution. That sounds like a fantasy to us now. It's completely switched. So we've gone from relying on grants to relying on loans, putting the burden of paying these huge costs onto students and their families.
I was lucky enough that I was able to receive a Pell Grant, a Cal Grant, work study, and other federally funded financial aid programs, and I'm really happy about that. But at the same time, I still had to work 3 part-time jobs throughout the year. I worked almost 30 to 40 hours a week during the school year and more than 60 hours a week during the summer. And somehow I still ended up with more than $30,000 of debt after I graduated.
I have Perkins loans and direct loans, and I'm a work study student. I have another job as well on the side, and I still have to take out private loans. I am currently I currently have around $40,000 in debt, and by the end of my 4 years, I would probably be a little bit over $60,000 in debt.
A generation ago, the Pell Grant covered almost 3/4 of the cost of going to a 4-year school. Today, it covers around 1/3. What that means is your average Pell Grant is probably going to cover, hopefully, the cost of books for a year, and not much more than that. So a low-income student who gets a Pell Grant still has a lot of costs to cover, and they don't have parents who can help them cover some of those costs.
It never occurred to me that I would not make a lot of money after going to law school. So repayment never seemed like a daunting task because I just always assumed I'm going to a great law school, I'm going to graduate, have a law degree, and get paid lots of money. And I could pay back my loans quickly and easily.
I just kept looking at these bills piling up. They were getting higher and higher, and I was looking at least another 2 to 3 years full-time to complete my degree. And also, I didn't see any way that I was going to be able to pay these back. And I thought, well, I really should start looking for a journalism job and go to work.
I was actually in training for USSA, and I started to get a really bad headache.
and that headache turned into an even worse headache, and I couldn't go to school anymore, and I ended up having something called a pseudotumor cerebri. And so I had to drop out of school my senior year of college so that I could have brain surgery. I had to leave school for an entire semester. I tried to catch up in the summer, and I just ended up with double the debt because the school wouldn't give me back the money because I had gotten sick at the end of the semester.
The reality of higher education in America today is that only about half of people who begin a degree program actually complete it within 1.5 times the allotted time. Those people who do graduate, 2/3 of them take out student loans. People commonly talk about the undergraduate student loans, and the average is about $20,000 for people with a bachelor's degree. But for those in graduate school, the numbers get much, much bigger. For master's degree recipients, the numbers in the 30,000s. For law students, I believe the average is over 100,000, and for medical students, it's about 150,000 in both federal and private student loans.
I received an offer to work as an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn. And my starting salary was $36,000 per year. And I had to make a decision between paying back my student loans or paying for rent. I couldn't do both. My rent was $1,000 per month, and I was earning about $1,800 per month. And there was nothing left to pay for student loans. So I placed them into forbearance.
I got my first bill from my student loans, and the first bill was a total of about $1,000. And it was quite a shock. I was expecting to see a bill of $500 a month. After that shock, I had 3 months warning that my payment was due, and it took me about 3 months to save up $1,000 to make my first payment. And after making my first payment, I owed more money than I owed before I made my first payment, after interest charges had been applied.
After I graduated NYU, the payments were scheduled to be, I think, somewhere around $1,400. I went to default, and that was a huge addition to the loan at that point. And currently now it's roughly about $2,000 per month.
People always talk about the $1 million diploma, right? The advantage of your degree over a lifetime. If you get a bachelor's degree versus not getting a bachelor's degree. But that advantage has actually gotten bigger since the 1970s. Not because the bachelor's degree people are earning more, but it's because the people without a bachelor's degree are earning less. So the top line is really flat, the bottom line is going down, and that advantage is getting bigger. But for the people who are just getting a bachelor's degree, the bonus or the payoff of that degree is not actually growing. It's actually, in the last decade, been getting a little bit smaller.
When I initially did it, I had no idea what forbearance was. All I knew is that I didn't have to pay back my loans at that time, so I was more than happy to do it. So for the next 5 years, while working as an AZA, my loans just increased. They ballooned. Like I said, I owed about $65,000. By the end of my 5-year tenure, I had probably an additional $25,000 in debt.
I called Sally Mae and I asked them, how did it get to be $54,000 when originally it was only $32,000? Oh, well, that's your forbearance. I said, my forbearance? I don't understand. Well, you signed the loan papers. You should be responsible. Do you want us to send them to you? I said, can I renegotiate the loan? Oh, absolutely not, unless you go back to school. Excuse me, I was like 60 years old. Was I really going to go back to school? I don't think so.
Little did I know that the lenders are more than happy to let you put your loans into forbearance because of a racket called compounding interest. Basically what it is that the interest continues to accumulate while the loan is in forbearance, and that interest gets tacked onto the principal. So the interest increases exponentially as the amount gets tacked onto the principal. So it's sort of a snowballing effect. Once the process of forbearance starts, your loans start to grow and grow and grow, and that's what happened to me.
The Citibank Student Loan Corporation would send me these notices, and they'd say, you are on deferment, or you're on forbearance, or you are on your grace period, having left school. this is just to notify you of your interest rates. And then they started sending me one saying, this is just to notify you of the change in your interest rates. And it was like watching the odometer on a car.
There's no limit to what they can charge in terms of fees and penalties if you go into delinquency or default. And so, since they have the power to take your $12,000 student loan and turn it into $40,000 of penalties, why wouldn't they do that? I mean, why wouldn't they want to charge you absolutely as much as they possibly could, knowing that they'll never settle? You know, knowing that courts have found that people's Social Security payments and their federal disability payments can be seized to pay back old student loans, or even their disaster relief payments from the federal government if you're in an earthquake or a hurricane. So, you know, knowing that they're going to get their money, they might as well put it down that you owe as much money as possible. And that sort of seems to be the thinking behind their delinquency and their default policies.
Unfortunately, very little data are collected on private loans. However, one recent indicator is that a big for-profit college company called Corinthian Colleges told its investors a few months ago that they were going to make about $130 million of their own private loans to their own low-income students in this fiscal year, and they expected defaults to be around 58%.
It's really sort of a three-headed beast comprising the lenders, Congress, and the universities. You have the universities who are raising their tuition, but you also have this lending industry that is sitting there, you know, funding Congress to the tune of, you know, tens of millions of dollars per year, who also are pushing to get the loan limits increased, and also are frankly responsible for having all the consumer protections that were taken away.
For whatever reason, Congress has decided to treat student loan debt completely differently than every other type of debt. So you can discharge your gambling debts in bankruptcy, but you can't discharge your student loan debt in bankruptcy. And that makes absolutely no sense.
And that one sort of exception to the bankruptcy law, I think, really provides an indication of the extraordinary power that the student loan industry has in our political system.
Once you made that decision to sign the promissory note and become a Sallie Mae customer, you're done with them. You can't get rid of that loan. There's no discharging it in bankruptcy. And they make more money the worse you do with that loan. They kind of want you to be in delinquency, and they kind of even want you to be in default, assuming you keep paying it back. And you probably are going to keep paying it back because you don't have any choice. So if you just look at their basic business model, they don't want to be nice to you. And so all of the people that I've heard from, it doesn't seem like Sallie Mae ever makes a mistake in anybody's favor. If they ever make a mistake, it's against the student.
You know, if you look at it in the roundhouse figures, okay, it was $30,000 to go to UNR for 3 years. They now say that I owe about $90,000, so it's tripled.
I originally borrowed $46,000 from my private student loan, and I think when we spoke a year and a half ago, I owed approximately $80,000 to $90,000. And now that figure in July 2009 is about $122,000.
I borrowed $35,000. I've paid back almost $26,000, and I still owe $57,000.
So in relationship to the cost that I have now is $200,000, which is maybe one of the few times I've ever said it out loud. Uncomfortable. I was actually kind of worried about saying the amount.
So right now, you know, I'm in about $80,000 in student loan debt. I don't even know how much medical debt I'm in because my mom kind of keeps up with those bills because it's just too daunting for me. And I'm in about $5,000 in credit card debt. So I do this work because I don't want anybody to feel the way I feel. You know, I don't want the banks to call, you know, their job and tell them that they owe them so much money. And it's difficult. And these people at our conference, I just want them to understand that they don't have to go through this. And that, you know, if they want to go to school, they should try to get a scholarship or they should try to get grants. And they should definitely take out money from the federal government. Because the private loan industry, they don't care about people. You know, when I told them, look, I don't make that much money. I make $34,000 a year. There's no way I could spend $600 or $900 a month paying just for loans. And they said, well, there's nothing we can do about it.
Can you get a light, please? Personally believe whenever we start working on something, we should always understand whom is it we're working for. So I think this video touched on a lot of key topics. And attending these colleges is definitely, you know, the cost of attendance is skyrocketing. It's going past, which you can imagine it used to be 10, 20 years, 5, 6 years down the road. So certainly making higher education more affordable is one of the goals and purposes of this unit here. To go out to Capitol, I know we can find tons of students like this in UC Davis. It's just a matter of reaching out to students. There might be a few sitting at this table right now who are in this situation, who can personally relate to it. So again, you know, our purpose, the reason we exist as an organization, as a unit, is to voice student opinion at the Capitol. And you know, the few things that I touched on this year, which are definitely a part of the bill package. One is, how can you make it more affordable? You can certainly increase the financial aid portion for students. So that's one thing we're looking at this year, is to work on increasing access to Cal Grant program, Cal Grant funding for students. The second thing they touched on was the private student industry is definitely not willing to work with students. And to a large extent, that is a true statement. And the interest rate does accrue. And as a student, when we check out a loan, not a lot, there are statistics out there which tell us, a significant portion of us don't really understand what's the difference between a federal loan, what's the difference between a private loan. So just, education about financial literacy, that's missing among students. We are the consumers coming out of high school making all those decisions, and we are not properly being educated about what is the difference. And then what is the difference and how much interest we will pay, and how much payment, and what's the amount of payment we will be making back once we take out a loan, and what does it cost us if we want to go into forbearance. So those kind of issues, just financial literacy part. So that's the second thing we're working on this year. And the third one is, as I talked about, so prior to 2005, the private student debt used to be dischargeable like any other debt, credit card debt, gambling debt, different kind of debts I talked about. But after 2005, Congress amended the bankruptcy law, so now the private student debt is not dischargeable, even if you were to file for bankruptcy. So, we have one of the bills, since banks are under the Interstate Commerce Clause, so a state cannot tell a bank what to do, so there's certainly a resolution at California, in the California State Legislature, and then there's a bill in the U.S. Congress, which is asking the U.S. Congress to basically revise their bankruptcy laws and reverting back to what they used to prior to 2005. So students who are taking private student debt, who are not able to make the payments, are able to discharge the debt. And the purpose of that is not to be able to default on loans, but to give us as students some strength, some say in the process of negotiation. So we have, we can go back to the table, and so banks have some incentive to work with us rather than shut us off and say, well, we don't care. You make that much, this is how much you owe. You find a way to pay this. So those are big topics we're working on in our bill package this year, and. Before we get into I'm just going to briefly explain the legislative process so we understand how bills move through the California legislature, how bills move within ASUCD. But before I get to that, I actually want to share two statistics with you guys, which kind of, surprised me to an extent, but I did expect them to be true. So, back when the November elections were taking place, I did a quick study on youth participation in the political process. And what I came across was, so let's say if there are 100 eligible voters in this state, only 13 of them are within the age group of 18 and 24. I think it's better if we can put it on the board there so that we can see what the numbers flow. So out of 100, we only have people in the age group of 18 and 24 only make up 13% of those. And out of 13, only 7 students registered to vote. And out of 7 who registered to vote, only 4 end up voting. So even though we have we can represent up to 13% of the political process, we only represent a quarter of our strength. So it's critical for us as students to get involved in the process. Again, politics is all about representation. If you can get your voice out there, they'll listen to you. If you vote, they'll listen to you. If you can lobby, they'll listen to you. So it's a matter of going out to the Capitol, let them know that you're concerned, you're aware of what they're doing, and you want them to make choices.